You're listening to the 14th Source for all geeky and nerdy news and discussion, which means that you're listening to a podcast.
For all intents and purposes.
I am D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And we are your two overeducated codependent nerd hosts, bringing you the things that we like to talk about, but filtered through inquisitive and critical lenses. In the episode for Friday, March 18th, 2022.
It is a big week this week, right? This is a huge week. It's big, it's massive. Or not, but it's the first home release of Spider-Man No Way Home came out, right? So in theory, I've watched it.
Have you?
No, I have not.
Oh, I have not either.
I have not. It's on my list. I had several people tell me, oh, you should watch all of the previous movies before seeing this new one. And I said, oh, both of them? And they said, no, all of them. Mm-hmm. Like, oh, and funny enough, I haven't even seen two of them, the Amazing Spider-Man 1 and 2. But it's also speaking of Marvel and Marvel adjacent things, it's also, they released a trailer for the new Disney positive series Miss Marvel.
Yeah.
Featuring, I got to make sure I pronounce it right, because comically there's a reason why now everyone pronounces it differently. Kamala Khan as the titular character Miss Marvel. Based on the, 20, was it, God, when did the original comic come out? Is it 2015 or is it 2005? It's recent, right? It's in the last,
Yeah, it's modern.
I believe by G. Willow Wilson, I believe.
Oh, man, we should have done our research.
2014.
I'm seeing 2014.
Okay, so it's really in the last 10 years. And it was written by G. Willow Wilson, among other people. I just know because G. Willow Wilson is in Seattle. And she will often, she's done multiple signings at my local comic book shop. And at first I was like, wow, how fancy, until I realized, she just lives around in the neighborhood, right? But that's cool though, right? Actually, totally. I think I may have a signed, I don't know if I stood in line to have her sign it, of the Miss Marvel collection, volume 1. Yeah.
It looks interesting because people were, based on the teaser trailer they'd released, it was clear that her powers are going to be work a bit different in the show than they did in the comic, where she was basically kind of a Mr. Fantastic Inhuman, right?
Well, you already said some real important words as to probably why they're doing it differently. Right. Inhuman and Mr. Fantastic, right? Because, the Inhuman thing, for those who don't know, right? The Inhumans were introduced in Marvel's Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and then also featured in a TV series that disappeared so quickly that people forgot it ever came out.
Right. Was it TV?
Or a TV miniseries. I don't even know. I know there was a cinematic premiere of the first episode or whatever, but it was, as I understand, very poorly received.
Yes, bombed.
So it's the idea that, this character in her story is interesting and the character is lovable, but boy, oh boy, do we need to get as far away from possible. Right. As far away as possible from Terrigen Mist and Inhumans. But but the teaser trailer came out this week. Yeah. It looks exciting. There's not a lot of homework, at least I think it looks exciting.
It looks really cute. It looks charming. It looks like it's fun. It kind of almost has a similar kind of quirky vibe of something like Into the Spider-Verse, in the sense that, I don't know if it's going to be part of the show, but they were kind of doing comic book overlay kind of stuff and just really kind of leaning into the kind of the teen angle of it. And it seems to be pretty earnest and based on the trailer, authentic to an extent, as authentic as it can be. So it looks really cool. And
the character is always, at least from what I read, she is kind of a nerdy girl that happens to discover that she has these powers. But from what I saw, that's what it felt like, right? Mm-hmm. It really looked like a young woman who, loved nerdy stuff, was clearly obsessed with Captain Marvel, which is consistent with the comic. Although I do lament one of the jokes I literally laughed while reading a comic book, which I don't do that often, because I'm reading. But when because in the comic, I'm not sure what they're gonna do with the show, but in the comic she actually can change shape, right? Mm-hmm. That's really what her ability is, which includes kind of stretchy and embiggening and stuff.
Embiggening, yeah.
But she what happens when she's first hit with the Terrigen Mist, right? She's she kind of has this vision that she is in. I don't know. She's in heaven basically, and she sees, you know, and she has these interactions, and when she comes back, she looks like Miss Marvel, you know, before she becomes Captain Marvel, but like the slutty version, right? That's like the original, like, you know, and actually she, I believe, calls it the slutty version.
Okay, I was gonna say, I'm like, damn, dude.
So she comes back looking like that, and then she freaks out, like, oh my God.
Like blonde hair and
I came
white.
back as a white lady. Yeah. My parents are going to kill me, right? And, but either way, I mean, it still has a lot of that same feel. So I'm excited, and it's coming out in like June, right?
Yeah.
It's the weird thing about the time we live in, where like any old notions of release dates and like the kind of the normal annual schedule that we got used to it feels like it's all just up in the air, and just TV appears out of the mist.
Right. Yeah, I mean, because that's the thing, you know, event television has changed definition. It's not like, oh, this show is coming. It's more like, bam, the show is here.
Right. Like, and, I mean, so I think Disney, every show they've announced, I mean, that a release date for, it's within 3 months of announcing, right? They had Moon Knight, Star Wars, Obi-Wan. Now they've got Miss Marvel, and they're all like within 3 months of the trailer.
Right.
Which, yeah.
It reminds me of like those E3 press conferences where they're like, they talk about a game and then they end the little presentation going like, and you can download it right now.
Today. Yeah. So kind of exciting, you know, kind of comic booky nerd news there. We'll see where it goes. Like I said, I am excited to see Miss Marvel, because I do think it's a neat character, and although it will be different than the comics, it's got the right feel.
Honestly, like, based on my preferences at this point in time, I'm more excited for it than Moon Knight.
Oh, you mean Miss Marvel than Moon Knight? I was like, what's it? Is that another Marvel series? Yeah, no.
Marvel bought Stephen King's It.
I actually agree. Although I'll watch Moon Knight, I'm not, and I love Oscar Isaac, right? He can, you know, do whatever he can. Right. You know, and Moon Knight is interesting, I guess. But it's got some real grimdark and gritty, and I'm like, oh, you know what I don't want? That.
The interesting thing about Moon Knight that is appealing to me, that I don't think was really in that trailer, which is apparently they're going to be cycling through many of his different visualizations. Like the trailer had him in his more classic superhero costume, but they've released posters where he's in his like white, more recent comics where he's basically a guy in a white suit and like a face mask. Like, oh, that's kind of cool. And by white suit, I mean like a suit jacket, slacks.
Well, the character's got a long kind of weird history, is my understanding, because it, you know, and I don't know a whole lot. I've read somewhere.
Neither do I. Yeah.
But it kind of came from the era when the rules changed and you could do more like. It's from the same era that gave you like Dracula and werewolf comics, like where suddenly monster shit could go into comics because the comics code changed. But then also it was, you know, there's a little bit of hashtag edgy because the character is multiple personality disorder, or at least in some permutations.
Right. Or dissociative identity disorder, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, that's what they said. Because I know originally when it first came out, it was just schizophrenia, but now it's like, okay, we know there's better, yeah. So we'll see. We'll see about that.
Yeah.
But I thought, while we're talking about, you know, these things, I've watched 3 Spider-Man movies of the 6 or 7 that I'm scheduled to watch. And I guess because it's still kind of fresh in my mind, I wanted to take a minute to talk about, I guess it's a week in geek of sorts. I want to talk about Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3.
All right.
Because I guess it's interesting that these movies, right? So Spider-Man came out in 2002?
Yes.
Because I know the one thing I distinctly remember is that the original trailer was September of 2001, I believe it came out, on or about.
Yes. I was working at the theater when we had that trailer going, and it was like all of us nerds working at the theater would often go into, you know, because you'd have to go around and check the theaters to make sure there's no riffraff going on. We kind of timed it out, like we know when the Spider-Man trailer is playing, so watched a lot by the nerds at the theater. But yeah, they had to pull it
because it featured the World Trade Center, which, you know, right about that time was in fact no longer in New York.
It was felled.
It was felled. So that's, I mean, 2002. So really, when you think about it in kind of modern superhero cinema, you know, other than X-Men, it was one of the, you know, it's one of like those, or the first ones of what you might call this modern generation of superhero film.
Yeah, it and the X-Men really kind of turned the tide on superhero movies.
I don't know when Daredevil came out, but it didn't turn any tides, so we're not going to mention it.
I mean, it turned the tide away. It lowered or receded the tide. I'm not sure.
But so it was a really, and so like in that regard, it was, you know, I remember a lot of people saying, "Oh, it's really good." You know, it you know, it kind of changed the conversation. You know, written and directed by Sam Raimi.
Yeah, so I was a fan, even though I didn't care about Spider-Man at all. I was a big Sam Raimi fan at the time. I will say, before you go into it, because I'm guessing you probably have a similar approach, the first two, but especially the second, lives fondly in my memory. But like many things, it's probably been, oh God, hold on, I gotta do math. Maybe almost 15 years since I've seen them.
Yeah, I realized that the third one came out in theaters, around 2007. I was living in upstate New York, and I think that's the last time I saw any of them, honestly.
We might have seen that together.
We may have.
Whoa.
So, but yeah, so, and I remember the second one really fondly, but also the first one. And
right.
so rewatching it was a bit of an interesting thing, just because it's been a while, but also because, you know, what used to be this standout movie in a field of few is now a movie in a field of you know, tens.
Right. It's become fossil underneath the pressure of everything that's come after.
Right. And so it was an interesting thing to go back and rewatch it. So for those those that don't recall which movies I'm talking about, it's Spider-Man 1, 2, and 3, which Tobey Maguire, and then the first one features Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn, the Green Goblin, and James Franco as Harry Osborn, and Kirsten Dunst as Mary Jane Watson. The second movie features basically all of them again. And Alfred Molina as Otto Octavius, Dr. Octopus. And then the third movie pretty much features most of them again, although I don't think Alfred Molina's in it, but it does then also add on Topher Grace, I believe.
Topher Grace, yes.
As Eddie Brock.
And Thomas Hayden Church, I believe.
Thomas Hayden Church is the Sandman.
Thomas Hayden Church is the Sandman, which is the villain that Sam Raimi wanted, which is why he's got a much better arc. And Eddie Brock, who Sam Raimi did not give two shits about and was forced to use.
I didn't know that.
Yep. He openly hated Venom even before he made the movie. He's like, Venom sucks. It's 90. Because he was like a kid he liked Spider-Man in the 70s, right?
Right. And Venom was a creation of the 80s.
Yeah.
I always joke that like I don't have a lot of memories of being, you know, like the early to mid 80s. But I, you know, just other than basic, like, but the one distinct memory I have was like, it was like some like book club or something I could get at my elementary school. And they had an issue of Spider-Man and had him in the Venom costume. And I remember it was a big deal because it was like, well, what is this costume? Right. Yeah. And I sure always remember, and I never found out what it was, you know, it wasn't until years and years and years later, I was like, oh, that was actually not just a new costume. That was actually a bad alien from outer space.
Right.
So yeah, so I'm watching these movies. One thing I will say, Willem Dafoe is actually in all three of them. Weirdly enough, I remember a story where he basically like reached out to them like, I want to do this, and I believe it. Like he's in this movie to be the Green Goblin, and I actually appreciated him, I think, more than I did the first time I saw it. And actually, I have this weird theory I'll talk about where I think this idea that actually what the Green Goblin is actually it's a family like it's a genetic mental disorder, right?
Okay, yeah,
because he's got it, and where he sees himself as the Goblin distinct from himself, and then of course Harry gets it as well. It's really fascinating. Except with Harry, it manifests as his father, not as an evil version of himself. Which is, again, it manifests as the Goblin. I've been stuck on that since watching him. But also, and then the second movie, Alfred Molina, who I mean, I still think he's good. Like, he's great. I don't. It's funny because the only other thing I always think of with Alfred Molina is the opening to Raiders of the Lost Ark. So it's like,
oh, that's right, yeah.
that was the thing. He was the guy in the beginning of Raiders, and then he's Dr. Octopus. But he was. I also think he was great. I'm actually, not having seen the new Spider-Man, but knowing that he's in it, I am so jazzed to see both of them again. Actually, well, I don't think you see Willem Dafoe, but I think you just hear him. Yeah. They both do some great work. James Franco, I forgot he was in this movie.
Yeah. Fresh off of Freaks and Geeks, he's doing stuff,
and it's so weird being like, wow, it's been 15 years, and you're weird now. I mean, in terms of what everyone that because he went off and got his PhD and started doing art house film and maybe being a little weird. That was interesting to see that, and actually, I think he. It's an interesting kind of contrast because again this family mental disorder, but also is like the best friend who feels betrayed by the main character and whatever else. It's I guess what I'm seeing is I'm seeing like the kind of the stuff that the later superhero movies generally or comic book movies really start building on, like a lot of these things, but like kind of. Maybe not always done as well, not quite as sharp. Like some of the writing is like, oof, like,
yeah.
Did you get that off of a bad page of the comic book?
Right. There's the age, it being at the spearhead of modern comic book movies, and it was novel at the time. But then there's also part of me that's like, how much of that is Sam Raimi? Because he's a notable goofball.
Again, this is the person that gave us Evil Dead and Army of Darkness and
arguably the first modern superhero movie, Darkman.
Right. So it is that weird thing where it's not sure kind of which how much of it is one thing, how much is just but there's also the idea that like what was acceptable in a superhero film, like what would get past the producers and the writers. I mean, because I think X-Men was definitely going in a different direction. There were definitely I think a lot more. They were like, no, this is going to be a serious movie,
Yeah, serious and grounded, right? They're
almost too grounded, actually.
Right, Storm didn't even fly. No, they were definitely operating under the idea that because the Batman movies went too camp, they're like, no, we need to make this believable at the very least, right? And so, so they went with all leather costumes, sure. After this, they're going to a very specialized bar.
Which is funny because at the time it was like, it's they even make the joke, what do you want to wear? Yellow and blue?
Tights, yeah.
And now you look back like, actually, yeah.
No. I still argue like the X-Men costumes don't work. Don't work live, but yeah,
I think some of them do. Wolverine's is probably a good example of one that doesn't.
No, I mean, look at Gambit's costume. Like, what is happening there? The novel thing, and it was smart on Sony's part, Sony and Sam Raimi, I'm guessing, to really lean into the comic bookiness. So I think, yes, I would make the argument all day that we have X-Men 1 to thank for making bringing superhero cinema into the zeitgeist and like, oh, this can be done well, but we don't have the MCU without Spider-Man 1 and 2 are easily, right?
Right. No, and it's all definitely like you see this, and of course we don't have the MCU without all the good licenses being in a possession of Sony and Fox, right?
Right. All the popular licenses. Like, shit, what are we going to do with Iron Man? Who the fuck cares about Iron Man? But
now that like, so I'll say it's a little weird watching because it feels like, okay, this is like maybe not the best Marvel movie I've seen, right? It's the kind of the feeling I'm getting, like it's okay. Some of it's kind of hokey. Some parts you're just like, and actually the one thing that surprises me is because it does inconsistent with my memory is Tobey Maguire. I remember thinking he was really cool. And, like I thought he did well at the part. I thought he was, which of course not having any context of what Peter Parker should be like, but I still do, right. So it's fine. Although I have like 7 different examples of Peter Parker now to compare it to. But now going back and watching it, I actually like. Granted, I just watched Spider-Man 3, so you're gonna have to keep this in mind. I find him insufferable, more often than not. But not just because Spider-Man 3 is where he plays like the shittiest version of himself.
No, he's kind of a self-absorbed dick to Mary Jane, right?
Right. There's a lot of, just times where he says stuff you're like, oof, guy.
Right. He has some personality issues. I do remember thinking that. Now, I'd forgotten it because I think in my memory lives more the Spider-Man scenes than the Peter Parker scenes. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I do remember him just being like, very insufferable at times. Like you, I think what I did is I wrote it off. I'm like, well, that must be how the character is in the comics. I still have no idea, like you said.
We're right. In fact, the only comic of Spider-Man I've read literally doesn't feature Peter Parker. It's Otto Octavius. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, no, I've only read Superior Spider-Man, so I don't know what Peter Parker.
So you just heard it in Alfred Molina's voice the entire time.
I imagine Tobey Maguire with Alfred Molina's voice.
You're like when Tom Holland's contract runs out, I got an idea. Hey, Al, what are you doing? You want to make a Spider-Man series? As Dr. Octopus? I love the character. No. Kind of. Of the 3 originals, which one do you think holds up the best?
That's a tough question.
I'm here to ask the tough questions, man.
I would say I still like the second one. I think the best. The first one, I think this is a thing where I'm excited to see what they do with Amazing Spider-Man, and now appreciate what they did with Spider-Man: Homecoming and ostensibly Captain America: Civil War. Is they didn't spend an hour on Uncle Ben dying, because that like the whole in that whole origin story. Because there's a point where I'm watching it. And I get it. It's important to the story, especially because that was the first Spider-Man movie, right? It's not like we'd had a Spider-Man movie and a TV series every 5 years. Mm-hmm. It's not a Superman problem, right? But there's this idea that it's like it goes on for a while, and you're like, oh, okay, yeah, with great power comes great. Yeah, okay, well, yeah, that's a classic line now. And then eventually it's all right, he's dead. Okay, let's start the movie now. Is what it feels like.
Follow-up question: of the 3, what's your favorite Stan Lee cameo?
Oh, wow. I was going to say, and okay, so I will admit, I bought them on iTunes because I couldn't find another way to watch them easily. Sure. And it wasn't that expensive. And I may have watched like special editions or cuts, but I was shocked at how little Stan Lee there was. I think in the first one, he's just like, it's like blink and you miss him. He doesn't say anything. He just like pulls a kid out of the way or something.
Yep.
It was the third one where he comes in and says a line.
That's how it was with the X-Men as well. He's like, I'm a hot dog vendor looking into the sky where Magneto's doing some shit, right?
Where it's like eventually gets to the point where no, we actually will have him there. And that, you know what? Like I think the development of Stan Lee cameos over the years is fine. Like I'm okay with that. It's just it was weird because I forgot. I got so used to him like being a character in the scene for an extended bit, right? To just being a guy that like you could have missed him. So yeah, I don't really have a good answer to that because they're just so different back then.
Okay.
I guess the third one where he actually says something.
Well, what have you heard, and what are your expectations, and how excited are you to go into The Amazing Spider-Man?
I'm actually really, having never seen it, and Andrew Garfield, like looking back now, like that's the guy that well, because I was thinking about this, I was like, what has Tobey Maguire done? I haven't nothing I think I've seen. Whereas Andrew Garfield, I keep seeing him in stuff, right? Or I keep seeing him pop up in stuff. So like this idea that he's got like actor chops, So I'm curious if this is just like a younger Andrew Garfield, what it'll be like. I think he seems like a fabulous actor. And, there's a joke about, no, I'm not going to make a joke about Andrew Garfield's penis, but there is a really good, if you haven't, there's a whole thing. I think when he was in his costume during a shoot and people said like, oh, hello, what? And, cause you can see he's apparently got, and so a lot of people.
You started this, dude. I'm not even participating.
It's just funny because it's this thing where apparently that's like there's this old wives' tale that in fact not old wives' tale, but this like whatever the word, like a rumor that like in fact he was not wearing any padding. So that's a joke. I have a lot of friends who talk about like, oh, Andrew Garfield. You mean the Spider-Man that's packing? But anyway, enough about penises. I just think it's hilarious because to this day I still have. Friends who will jokingly send pictures of, I think one of his shots where he's like hanging off the wall and somebody's like digitally enlarged his his lower torso just like comically, so it's like, oh boy, Spider-Man, is that your web shooter?
So you're not no idea, nothing about the story then.
Well, so actually that's one because the story doesn't feature Mary Jane Watson. I understand the focus is on Gwen Stacy,
right?
Which is weird because I didn't know she's also in Spider-Man 3. I like completely forgot.
No, right, yeah.
And I think because I didn't know who the character was. Like I didn't have any context for the character. So now that I do, because I've seen, well, really because I've, seen, inundated with enough Marvel shit, but also I've seen Into the Spider-Verse. So although, Spider-Gwen is different, but like I now understand that Gwen Stacy is now like a popular or important enough character that, she is her, her own spider.
Yeah. And apparently she has actually like a spider code name now and is no longer Spider-Gwen. Apparently she's Ghost Spider.
Oh, okay. That makes sense.
Spider-Gwen's is better though.
Right, but it's kind of it's a tough sell, right? Like, who is this Spider-Gwen? Well, let's start with ladies named Gwen.
Right, she webs of villains hanging off the hang off the the side of a building. Who are you? I'm Spider-Gwen. Right? Yeah, it doesn't really. Yeah, he's like, Spider. Tell your friends about me.
So, but it'll be interesting to see that because I know that that's a character I don't have any context for outside of that. But now that I know who it is a little bit, right, it'll be more meaningful, I think, Yeah.
I mean, and for me, like, I still haven't seen them. I kind of want to, at least the first one, just because the hype that came out because of recent events. Spoilers, I guess. But for me, I'm also kind of going in with some headcanon that it's the sequel to Daleks in Manhattan that we all deserve.
That's a take right there.
For those who don't know, deep cut a little bit. Andrew Garfield did appear in 2 episodes of Doctor Who.
Oh shit! I completely forget that he's actually the. Oh my god! That's again another thing where it's just like Andrew Garfield shows up all over the place.
Yeah, that's the thing. Tobey Maguire was kind of an interesting hire because, like, he was like super serious dramas and like super, like, indie kind of, not indie, but like, independent film, super drama guy, and then Spider-Man, and we're like, okay.
Now since then he's gone on to be in a lot of like really big actor stuff, right? So it's weird that like in the middle of that he's Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Was apparently into it enough. He actually, they say he wanted to come back for the recent one, the No Way Home. So. Right. Which I always like that. And actually, the more
we don't know if he comes back because we haven't seen it.
Oh, whatever, man. I've seen like the cast of like.
I've seen what's it called? The internet.
Yeah, I've seen the internet, and actually, it's one of the things I was shocked about is the number of people that apparently come back for that movie.
Yeah.
In one way or the other, and I'm kind of like, there's something about, and I don't know how it works in the movie, but like when people, and granted, I get it, they were paid, but also like they wanted to come back to a lot of extents. Although I did hear that some of them had some really interesting writers. Like, okay, I'll come back, but only if, like, what was it? Jamie Foxx, who played
Electro.
I guess his was they had to redo his costume.
Yeah, I don't want to be blue. Yeah.
And so, but I've heard that they all had like these fun writers of like, well, you got to do this, or I want to.
Right. I heard that for Willem Dafoe, he's like, I want to do stunts.
I could believe that.
I wonder what they're gonna do. Because we know he's in the movie, but because that one of the most derided parts of Spider-Man 1 is that Green Goblin costume, right? He's a Power Ranger. No offense, Andrew.
Yeah.
Spider-Man went Super Sentai.
But it's weird because like that's to me what the Green Goblin looks like because that was
Goblin time.
That's my familiarity. And when I see the classic Green Goblin costume, I'm like, what is that? Like, what is this? Like, literally a goblin on a surfboard shit.
Right.
But again, that's what the character was. I just don't know.
Did Hobgoblin appear?
You mean James Franco?
Yeah, like did he? I think he rides the board at some point in 3.
Well, he does in the third movie. He does become basic. I don't know if they call him Hobgoblin or if he's just James
Green
Franco.
Goblin 2. Oh.
Or Green Goblin. They don't call him James Franco. I'm sorry. Green Goblin 2. It's weird. He puts on his father's old costume and calls himself
Norman. Don't call me Norman. He turns around, he's got the mask on.
Call me James Franco. But I don't know what they call him in the movie. Looks like New Goblin is what he's credited as.
Oh, nice.
Because he never says his name. I don't think, but he does, like, even early in the movie, he's already on he's given up the Goblin glider for the Goblin snowboard, which I thought was a little bit silly, but
indeed.
But anyway, I think, the one thing about it is these movies aren't as great as I remember them, but they're fine.
Yeah.
And it's nice to see kind of how we get from. At some point when I'll convince myself to go watch the history of X-Men movies to see how we get from, like. Because really, prior to that, you had Superman, you had Batman, and then I feel like every other superhero movie was kind of a joke.
Or sublimated, right? I don't know if that's the right word for it. But, like, I feel like I honestly did not know that Blade was based on a comic book when it came out. Like, oh, this is just a vampire action movie.
Right. Other than the fact that there's a Marvel logo at the beginning, you wouldn't really think about that.
Right.
But then I also think about, like, how you, like, the Captain America movie that, like, oh, yeah, it looks pro-cheesy,
Yeah, what else? Yeah, the Batman movies really kind of sunk the whole genre into the ground because the Schumacher of it all.
And I think it's probably that Spider-Man and Superman and Batman kind of dominated the superhero movie genre in different ways, right? Superman, Christopher Reeve, that first movie was great, banging score, solid movie, and then the series kind of goes in a weird place.
Well, Superman 2 is pretty good.
Well, it depends on which cut or who you ask, right? Because that's right where Richard Donner gets.
You just described every movie.
Well, I know, but, like, that's one where literally there's two. Nowadays there's two different versions of the movie, right. And some people say that the one that premiered was bad, or wasn't, was whatever. And then after 2, then you start getting weird shit. The Quest for Peace.
Other ones. Richard Pryor that's not Quest for Peace. That's the third one. I don't know. We're not here to talk about that.
Is it Richard Pryor? It's not. Is it?
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah. No, it is Richard Pryor that's in those.
Is it Richard Pryor? It's Richard.
I don't
Pryor.
remember which one it was in.
It's Superman 3. Whatever the hell that movie was about.
Is that the nuclear one or is that the?
I believe it is. It's the whole thing that involves. The only thing I remember is that they find kryptonite. But the whole thing is there's, like, unknown element in it, and he looks at his cigarettes. It says contains low tar, and he changes it to low tar. The idea, and so they're like, oh, it just got low tar in it. But the idea is like they do like a red kryptonite thing, if I recall.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Where he becomes bad because of this, like, fucked up kryptonite.
Right.
That's whatever. Like, we're not here to talk about Superman 3.
No, we're certainly not, and we probably never will. For those that were wanting it, there you go.
No, so Spider-Man. It's the original Spider-Man trilogy, 2002 to 2007. Interesting. I guess now sort of tangentially part of the greater MCU through the power of multiverses.
And actually, bouncing off of that will be Sam Raimi's entry into the MCU will be with regard to multiverses as he's directing
The Multiverse of Madness. I'm sorry, Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange : yeah.
No, not Doctor Strange's colon.
Doctor Strange : is a multiverse of madness. I saw the results of his colonoscopy. It's a disaster. His hands weren't the only things hurt in that accident.
But it will be interesting to see what kind of effect that Sam Raimi has, because you could say it's a horror film. At least it kind of sounds like in part it is, Multiverse of Madness. And that's something that Sam Raimi does or has done.
Yeah.
But also, I'm going to say it. I'm curious to know who Bruce Campbell is going to play. Having him now seen him in 3 different parts in Spider-Man's 1, 2, and 3. I think that's another one where it proceeds to get more and more irritating of a character as we go on. Actually, I think the set 2 is the worst because that's the theater usher.
Yeah.
Whereas the first one is just the wrestling announcer guy.
Yeah. Was he in 3?
Yeah, he's the French restaurant maitre d'.
That's right. Do you know what they should do for Multiverse of Madness? Build off of what we saw in Hawkeye, right, where they had the stage play version of the Rogers the Musical. Mm-hmm. We should see other media adaptations in universe. So, like, what Bruce Campbell should do is he should be like, they've made like a TV miniseries. I could see him as Doctor Strange, but like all campy and silly, like one of those like it's like it would be like one of those 90s or late 80s Marvel movies, like The Punisher with Dolph Lundgren, or Captain America with the rubber ears.
Oh,
that'd be great. That's what I would like. It's not going to happen, but that's what I would like.
Yeah, definitely a weird kind of experience rewatching these movies. I don't think they're bad. I think they're fine. The third one is probably the messiest of the trilogy, mostly because it's a certain amount of, they have a lot of threads they want to try to wind up, and they're like trying to jam in characters, and they jam in Venom, which is just weird because it's like Venom is a slow burn, I feel like, in Spider-Man. Like, you have to spend some time, but they do it all in an hour,
Yeah, I mean, honestly, like I wouldn't ask you to watch it again, but anyone here watching it, watch it with the context in mind, like of what the movie would be had Venom not been in it, because that's the movie that Sam Raimi wanted to make, which is why like the Sandman storyline is pretty compelling. Like, it's actually, like, there's a lot of pathos there, and is a pretty sympathetic and interesting villain that is all but gone by the end because they had to work Venom in there, and Venom looks terrible.
Right. It's actually, I will say, having just watched it, you could just leave Venom out for a significant part of the movie and it wouldn't change. I mean, Peter Parker would be insufferable, but that's like, okay, check.
Right. Yeah, that checks out.
That makes sense.
Totally.
I don't know. I'm not sure if I could ever imagine a movie series doing Venom in a way that would feel, as a villain of Spider-Man, that would feel right, just because, again, and I think of it from the perspective of, he spends multiple issues with this like new magic suit, and then he realizes it's bad, and then it finds the only other person it can find that hates Peter Parker and Spider-Man as much as it does, and then they become Venom, and then canonically they say, "We are Venom." At least they do in some games.
It's interesting because I actually don't know if the suit is making me more risk-takey and cocky and asshole, because I think the reason why he got rid of the suit was because the artist at the time didn't want to draw it, and he had enough. He was such a power. It was Todd McFarlane. Was such a power. He's like, I want to do two things. I'm going to leave the company, or unless you give me my own Spider-Man book where I write and draw it, and I'm putting Spider-Man back in his original costume. And it wasn't with that decision that the symbiote became evil. That's my memory of it. I wasn't reading it, but that's my memory of how it worked. And
well, you would have been 4, so it's okay not to have been reading it.
Well, no, that's when the symbiote suit debuted. But
okay,
we're talking about like late 80s, early 90s here.
I thought the suit was only like a year or two long.
No, it was around for a while.
Oh wow, never mind. You're right. It's like 4 years.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, it's interesting. I wonder, anybody, if you know, dear listeners, was what we saw, the suit, how it was affecting Peter Parker's personality in Spider-Man 3, was that what was happening in the books? I don't remember. I don't think it was, but it was given a lot more personality when they decided to make it into a villain. Comics, making shit up as you go along since 1961. So good, yeah, that sounds fun. Well, you'll have to report back with your Amazing Spider-Man. Are you going to jump on that right away?
Yeah, I mean, I got them all on iTunes, for some sort of package.
Okay.
And then,
I heard you bought them for a pack. You literally bought them for a package. Yeah.
Sir, I realize it, like in some of my friend circles, like joking about Andrew Garfield's web slinger is a thing we do. And so I realize I've now brought that to this podcast inappropriately, and I apologize.
As always, dear listeners, looking at pop culture through critical and whatever the other lens is. Inquisitive. There we go.
Oh, we're inquisitive, all right.
Oh, sure.
Oh, this is also why they say that both Todd, not Todd McFarlane, both Tobey Maguire and Tom Holland Spider-Man make a joke about the costume being too tight around the web shooter. Andrew Garfield never does, and it's the joke that but he does. Anyway, good times. But yeah, good Spider-Man. Times. That's what I've done, and also the one thing is I'm also excited to go through and then also rewatch the Tom Holland series and get to Spider-Man No Way Home. Because, like I said, everyone's told me that it is this kind of like weird, let's bring back all the Spider-Man stuff. Let's, let's have this multiversal crossover.
Where are you at with like multiverse stuff? Are you into it? Are you kind of met on it, or do you have specific versions of it that you like, that you've seen in the past that you've enjoyed?
I mean, multiversal stuff is always so interesting, right? Without going into a big long discussion about multiverses, but I do find that, if you think about like Star Trek, right, had a multiverse, right? The mirror universe, first introduced in 1968's or 1969's Mirror, and then revisited sometimes to the chagrin of some of the fans in Deep Space Nine, and then referenced again in Star Trek Discovery. It's an alternate universe, but it's like the one where it's like, ooh, it's, whereas an actual multiverse where there's like infinite versions of you. Well, Star Trek's done that too, for episodes, like is like a conceit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I know how Marvel did it, in their comics, was a way so they could have different permutations of these characters, of these stories.
Yeah.
Right. Kind of in certain ways in the What If series, but also like you had the Ultimate comics where like, oh, that was just Marvel Universe 779 or whatever, right?
Yeah, it's funny when I think of like multiverse, like multiverses interacting, I think more of DC. That seemed to be their bag.
Yes, well, of course they were doing it, every 10 years or so, it seems.
Right.
But again, and part of it's because you when you have a comic book series, it goes over decades. How do you parse the fact that they things change, that writers want to do new things or start the character over or whatever. The DCCW verse had multiversal stuff as a conceit in several of their crossovers. And, it's a one-off thing. It's like, I like it. It's like, oh, look, here's the alternate version of your character where he's shitty or he's different or he's whatever, right? So I think that's neat. And then I also like, some of the ideas of being able to tell stories with similar characters in different ways. When done well, sometimes it's not done well, and you're like, whoops, we're never going back to Universe 79.
Right.
So I don't mind it. I do find that sometimes it just feels like, oh, really? Like it can be tired,
Right. I think the one thing that makes me worried about it, not that I'm worried about it in the sense that I don't know how much it'll be able to keep my attention. I'm kind of iffy on multiverse stories. But the fact that it seems to be Marvel Studios seems to be frontlining this multiverse thing by making it the focus of the most recent Spider-Man movie, by making it, the second Doctor Strange movie, right? Where we expect to see,
and making it the focus of Loki as well.
Right.
Although not till the end, but like
right.
That's.
So it just seems like, okay, they're really pushing this cart forward, and while I'm sure it's going to be fun, I'm a little, I don't know, not skeptical or hesitant, I guess I should say.
Well, and I get that, and one thing I will say, and I know you haven't seen Loki, but I think one of the things that I find interesting is if Marvel is doing this with the focus, like with a singular focus, right? Like we're doing this to get somewhere as opposed to doing it just to do it, right? What I mean by that is that if you watch Loki and then what's happening in Ant-Man and the Wasp, the
right.
idea that it could be that they've done this to introduce a specific bad guy.
Right.
Right, a specific villain who will be in multiple films, and you're going to get this pretty amazing actor doing this part in very different ways across different movies. Right, Jonathan Majors. That's
Yep.
And if that's the thing, like it's like when you see Thanos at the end of the Avengers, and you're like, oh, this is where we're going. Then if that's what they're doing, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
That's an and then of course you have some where you just do it for fun, right? Where you're in the theme and you mess around with it, but the idea that it's all going somewhere, as opposed to you know, if it just becomes every other movie is just a circle jerk of people that have played this part or whatever, you know,
Right.
cameos and whatnot, I'm less interested. But then also sometimes it lets us get new characters that they otherwise couldn't have explained easily. You know, like because American Chavez is in the new Doctor Strange film, and that's, you know, a character that I've seen and thought, oh, that could be interesting. You know, apparently Patrick Stewart is in it playing some part. That's cool, you know?
Yeah, I think if this is the direction they're pushing kind of this series called the MCU, because as you said, they're kind of pitching Kang as the next Thanos, for lack of a better word. Like, This is the big bad we have to contend with. Like, how do you unpop that cork? Like, well, everybody knows now that the multiverse is endless. And they beat Kang, they closed those access points, I guess, and it's like, hey, look, now we're street level heroes again. I don't know.
Well, I mean, sure. How do you unpop the Thanos cork, right? You just keep bringing bigger, messier threats to the table, or, you know, who knows? Right. I mean, the one thing I will say is that, you know, without saying too much about Loki, but like the idea that is the cork really being unpopped or popped, I guess.
There
popped.
We go. Yeah.
But then they also already outline, because it was popped, how it unpops, right?
Okay.
Because his appearance at the end of Loki is
multiverse cops, right?
Well, that's basically what you find out the TVA or really what they're doing is doing that. Spoiler. But I think that's so, like, you can imagine, oh, we can fix it, or you can just say, like some of these other shows, like, oh, we've returned it to one timeline, and then like, all right. Although I joke because the DCCW verse did that, and then it wasn't a hot second later that they reintroduced multiversal concepts. So, like, you know, you do what works, I guess. Yeah. Hashtag comic books.
Hashtag unpop that cork. So if you, dear listeners, have any thoughts about the topics we discussed this week, feel free to leave your thoughts as comments on the page for this episode at forallintents.net.
You can also post your comment or engage in conversations with other listeners on our Facebook page.
You can also find us on other social media, such as Twitter, where you can find us at our respective handles. You can find Andrew at Profound Dark, tweeting about tabletop role-playing games. You can find me at dbethel. You can also find us on Instagram, where you can find Andrew at Profound Brick, and me and my work at dbethel Comics.
While you're at our website, forallintents.net, you can also take a look at our YouTube page by clicking on the link in the corner that says YouTube. There you'll find this show, actually, as it's now being repeated on our YouTube page.
Yep. And I am going in there and adding timestamps for the different topics. It makes it a little more user-friendly and more specific for the YouTube experience, so please check that out. We use 2 tracks of music for our show. One is called Disco Medusae, the other is called District 4. And they're both written and performed by Kevin McLeod, the Clan McLeod, immortal swordsman, graph paper enthusiast, and musician extraordinaire.
You can find his music at incompetech.filmmusic.io, and that's all licensed under the Creative Commons 4.0 attribution license.
If you like the show and like to help us out, the best way to do so would be to subscribe to the show using whichever podcasting service you happen to use. What would help us out even more, though, would be to leave some sort of review, whether a text review or using the proprietary metric will help spread the word to new potential listeners through the magic of algorithms.
It's a big time for nerd shows, I guess. I mean, I'm still watching Star Trek. You know, we've got Star Trek Discovery has its season finale this week, or had its season finale this week. Yep. And Star Trek Picard is on the 3rd episode of 10 of its 2nd season, of which the 3rd season wrapped production, I think, a week or 2 ago.
Our goal right now is to get through season 4 before TNG leaves Netflix. So, and then we have some serious thinking to do.
It's funny because I got an email from Netflix this week that said, hey, we're going to raise the price. And I had to think, like, well, what is it I'm watching on here again?
Yeah. We tend to use Netflix quite a bit. So but the thing is, and I think we might have talked about this before, like these subscription services are basically set up to be piecemeal and sporadic. You discontinue or you cancel your subscription, you can log in the next month and reactivate it basically, and it's reactivate like your wish list or whatever is still there. So it's like, you know, it's it shouldn't be something that concerns me, but I really did get into the attitude of like, well, I'm already paying for it, might as well just. It takes more effort to click that button to cancel it than it is to just leave it going, right? But I don't know. We'll see what happens. I'll keep you updated.
You know, the one thing I will say, you know, with all these services, you know, Paramount Plus, for me at this point, it's now turning into the place for Star Trek, you know, and they have all of it. So I'm like, well, I guess this one is not ever gonna leave my my list, because I like being able to watch 50 years of Star Trek.
Right.
Or almost 60, I guess.
So until you catch up on all the Star Trek ever, dear listeners, I'm D. Bethel.
And I'm Andrew Asplund.
And for all intents and purposes,
that was a podcast.
I'm not gonna lie, my brain is a bit mashed potatoes right now. Right.
'Tis morphing time.
'Tis.